Thank you very much. That's a big pleasure for me to participate in this seminar. I can define myself as a researcher who is a specialist in genetic criticism, but I'm really fascinated by this one methodology, and I think that everybody who is interested in interpretation of literary works just need to use some achievements by genetic criticism. So thank you for inviting me to present some results of my research. And now I'm going to share my presentation. Bohdan, Ihor, Antonych. Antonych is a surname who is a really famous and influential writer, Ukrainian writer of the interwar period. I will try to explain in the first part of my presentation why Antonych is so important and why is so important also his unfinished novel. And then I would like to share some my ideas and also results of close reading of his manuscript. First of all, I would like to say, so you see right now, you see a portrait of Antonych and you see him as a very young man. I have to say that he died being just 28. He was born in 1909 in Austrian-Hungarian Empire. That is a territory of contemporary Poland, and he died in Lviv in 1937. Dmytro just mentioned this period, I mean 30s, and the meaning of this period for history of Ukrainian literature. And I have to say once again that 1937 was a year when many Ukrainian writers, dozens of Ukrainian writers were executed. 20th of the 20th century was a period of very interesting development of Ukrainian literature in Soviet Ukraine and also outside of the Soviet Ukraine, I mean in West Ukraine. And this part, I mean East Galicia was a part of the Second Polish Republic. Antonych wasn't Ukrainian Soviet writer, yes, and he, in time when his colleagues in Soviet Ukraine were arrested, I mean the beginning of 30s, Antonych had a chance to follow the previous tradition of modernistic literature. He died in 1937 just because unhappy surgery, but he had worked almost to this time, to 1937, on his novel. It was the first attempt to create not a poetry, not a novel, I mean Antonich's first attempt. And in this sense, that is a very interesting question and important question. Could we read and could we interpret in some way this text that's about 100 pages as a phenomenon in a history of Ukrainian culture? How to read a text which is unfinished? And in this case, it's not possible to say about late creativity, yes, because as for Antonych, it was just the beginning of his creativity, the beginning of his prose writing. Antonych is so important and interesting because he presents so-called high modernism in Ukrainian literature. He is very closely connected with European tradition. His name and his works became extremely important for reconnecting of Ukrainian modernistic tradition as an alternative to Soviet socialist realistic tradition in the post-war period. Among Ukrainian immigrants, the young people who were Ukrainian immigrants in the USA in 60s collected and republished some Bohdan Ihor Antonich's poems. In the Soviet Ukraine, his name and also his works had been for a long time abandoned and erased from the history of Ukrainian literature, just because of aesthetic, not because of politics. And the rediscovering of Antonych occurred in 60s in post-Stalinist era, and the person who found his writings in archives, in special funds of archives, was Ihor and another one person, also Ukrainian poet Dmytro Pavlichko, even published it in late Soviet time a separate volume of Antonych poetry. Antonych became also a key figure for Ukrainian postmodernism, and especially for Yuri Andrukhovich, who is maybe the most famous Ukrainian contemporary writer, not only in Ukraine, but also abroad. Andrukhovich dedicated to Antonych his PhD thesis and also his very provocative novel 12 Rings. And in this one novel, he tried to create alternative biography of Antonych. You can see right now, you can see on a screen, just a moment, yeah, now, a photo of, which was took during performance prepared by Polish Dance Theater, and they used this one novel for this one performance. And now I'm going back to Antonych unfinished novel. I would like to say several words about my methodological grounds. I use some very basic ideas as articulated by genetic criticism, including the idea that literary works are results of the genesis of text, not of the moment of inspiration. And I was especially interested in the text as a diachronic events. I also consider the history of text and history of writing, the very nature of writing as a process, an object of my study. So the study of text I understood as a way to study writing. I also tried to keep in my mind this distinction between poetical and also genetical approach. Then Poetics tried to answer a question, how is it done? Then genetic criticism is answering a question, how was it done? Unfortunately, I don't read French, and the only sources I can use were translation to English and also to Russian language. To Ukrainian, it's not too much translated. The most productive ideas in this special case, as for me, was an idea articulated by Daniel Ferrer about stylistic scenario, which could be found on the draft stage. Another one distinction is distinction between such terms as dossier, drafts, and also avant text as proposed by de Biasi. And this one idea, which was articulated by Mateusz Antonych, history of text can be a history of loss and not of a progress. That was, when I read this one article, published it in English language, that was the first time I saw a name of Mateusz Antonych. And I also paid my attention to this one sentences because I tried to understand it in a bit different way. As for me, we always lost something if we lost drafts. So not all questions we can address to drafts could be answered just analyzing the final text. That was my primary idea. Another one methodological point important for this my research was a point that genetic analysis is not the study of the poetics of draft. The tension and emptiness and sometimes the stopping of drafts are connected, as we see, with the energy of desire and writing, with the unpredictability of future meanings. To interpret all this as traces, incoherent, or simply unfinished text is to distort the nature of the draft, because the draft can be neither complete nor incomplete. The draft is a completely different space. And yes, now I would like to demonstrate several photos and demonstrate some peculiarities of Antonych manuscript. That is the first page, and as you see, it looks really typical for Antonych prosa writing. And as you see, Antonych usually changed not a lot in his text. We only can find here some words which are added to the written text. My question was what exactly Antonych usually add working on his text, because we can see something interesting. But before saying about that, I would like to describe the whole manuscript. What we have a manuscript which is located in Lviv in Vasil Stefanik National Library, and this manuscript contains 148, even not pages, yes, but leaves or sheets. And 88 of them contain text. What does it mean? That's important to understand how Antonych prepared himself and was prepared to writing this one novel. When writing poetry, Antonych usually uses notebooks. In this case, he used just really big separate leaves, and he folded it in half and then put one into another. And he prepared such handmade notebooks, one handmade notebook for each chapter. So he planned to write a novel in 25 chapters. So he prepared 25 handmade notebooks. And some of pages in these notebooks are empty, but it doesn't mean that Antonych used 88 first pages. No, he started to work with different chapters. Some of them are almost finished. Some other just contain several blocks of text. Yes, they are just the first study of writing. We can say that, yes, Antonych almost finished some first chapters, but it's not like he was working step by step. As for me, it was very interesting to realize that Antonych writing, it's not a linear writing. For the first time, this one text was published in 1992, and the second publication appeared 6 years later. What was interesting, the second publication included one more page, and this page contained a plan of this novel. Yeah, maybe it's better to show how it looks. Yes, that is this one page, plan of the novel on the second bench, and how it was published. So it's in Ukrainian. It's not so important to read what is written. Much more important are numbers. As you see, we have different kinds of numbers. From the left side, we have the first variant, have Antonych planned to organize his novel, and on the right side, we see some changes also. What we do not see in this one text, that how it was published, we don't see some special marks Antonych used to move some chapter in this plan. What is not represented in publication is some special notes in chapter 17 about the place of these episodes in the whole novel, in a plot, and also some signs which indicate moving or deleting in section 15 and 19. And then other researchers, my colleagues, tried to characterize the text. They also were looking for some appropriate perspective. They tried to analyze and describe this text from the perspective of a plot, from perspective of literary style, from perspective of mythopoetical elements, and also from a perspective of genre. Like me some citation. It is difficult to reconstruct the plot of the work on the basis of fragments, or we can only say this confidence that this novel had the features of the detective genre, murder, suicide, revenge, or a peaceful coexistence of different linguistic styles subordinated to the neo-romantic dominant. But the general consequence looks like that. Incompleteness of the text lead any literary approach only at the level of hypothesis. So none of them was really good to propose some general consequences, to define this text and its place in the history of Ukrainian literature. So now let me go back to manuscript. As I said, Antonych usually just add some words to written text. But it's interesting to realize what kind of words he usually adds. All the way from stones, and he added hard stones, like a giant rind, ordinary, unpretentious room, and so on, so on, so on. On each page, he add to the initial text also numerous adverbs, adjectives. He did something like that also in his poetry, but finally he had to choose only one word because he was limited by a form of poetry. In this case, we can only guess, was it the final version of text, or it was just a working version and something maybe will not appear in the final version of this text. But what is definitely that for Antonych, it's very important to describe the word in a way we experience it, we feel this word. Another one specific of this text is how Antonych described different events. What we know about this text, we know not only from written text of the novel, but also from a plan of this novel. And many events are only indicated in this plan, but not represented in 88 pages. So at least we have more than a half of planned text, yes? And key events which are really important for a novel plot are just indicated in a plan. Or then they are represented in a text. We could see that Antonych used very specific tools to describe these events and interaction. First of all, the dialogue looks really strange. From one of part, this is a key part, a crucial point for the plot, because that is a chapter then one of the main hero, whose name is Marko, accept an information about his friend's Ihor death. The full dialogues look like that. Your friend, the one who lived with us, your acquaintance, what? Read. So that's a dialogue between a hero, Marko, and his mother. And she's giving him a newspaper with a very short information about a young man who died. Another one chapter, that's a dialogue between the third main character of this novel, Sonia, with her father. And in this episode, Sonia's father realized that his daughter became an object of harassment. The full dialogues look like that. Forgive me, Dad. Forgive me, Dad. I'm innocent, Dad. Don't you believe me, Dad? Don't you believe your daughter? I'm afraid why you, it's not my fault, Dad. Forgive me, Dad. So actually, it's not a dialogue. Only some phrases articulated by one person. Another one person is keeping silent. So I have to say that the main event in this text unfolds between the physical or verbal actions of the characters and manifests itself through the intensification of experience. So what we have only this very strong tension, psychological and emotional tension of text, but not dialogues as a kind of giving information, not a dialogue as a communication, and events are nor nature represented or described nor showed in this text. Very often, Antonych also used just exclamation, especially in a moment of affective culmination of the text. Usually, so he completely changed his type of writing, and he breaks grammar, accumulates short and incomplete sentences, multiplies rhetorical question, which only emphasize the impossibility of insignificance of the answer, reiterates the statement with exclamation. That in Ukrainian, but I decided that I have no reason to translate it. Hop, hop, zhuch, zhuch, he, shu, shu, ha, 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 he, she, he, and so on. Yeah, and this text, you see here citation from about 5 or 6 pages, and this text is also interrupted for several times by musical fragments in the musical notation. So that is not a text with information. That's a text like a voice, just like a voice. Another one specific of this text is a place and role of different kind of description. And this description are changed from the very beginning to the very end of this manuscript. Antonych, what Antonych proposed and what we could really find in this manuscript are different kind of description, several page long, each several page longs. If to compare with a way Antonych described different event interaction, it looks like this text is the text of description. And if at the very beginning, we see that the main idea is, and the main feeling, the main position is compassion, yes, we see, for example, a kind of landscape, and this landscape is also connected with a kind of our mood, for example, psychological condition, and so on. But after that, the same landscape we can observe from some outside position. And the full text is constructed as the process of moving from unity of a subject and object to constructing a subject. A subject appeared in a text as a man who can experience a word. But to experience means to have a sensation and to have sense and to have feelings. And the process of personification is a process of moving from sensation to feeling, from some slight sensation to a very intensive excitement and admiration. What is even much more interesting, affect is not only a basis for personification, because in a moment when feelings became extremely intensive, we could observe a process of depersonification. The main hero, Marco, described a situation he remembered from his childhood. He described a situation when he and his friend Ihor were lost in a wild, in a forest, yes, and that was a situation. In this situation, they experienced very intensive emotion. What is important in this one fragment of text that we have description. We have description of an experience, of a child experience, but this one experience is articulated by an adult man. Children, the figure of children is a feature of other in modernistic literature. And starting to describe his own feeling, Marco, as the main character, moved to describing body experience as a shared experience. He started to talk not from a point of me, I, but from a point of we, our experience. He started to describe our experience, body experience, which is personal experience, which is definitely personal experience, is represented in this text also as common and shared experience. But what we see also in this text is a movement from this affective stage, affective condition back to the society. Marco and Ihor experienced something what we could describe as erotical and I would say as sexual drive and also death drive. And they experience desire and fear, and they move to experiencing, to feeling the shame. As for me, what is depicted in such a way is a movement from subconscious drives to ethical dimension, to social conditions. So I just tried to describe in several words some observation as based on draft, not on finished novel, but only on draft manuscript of Antonych novel on the second bench. I agree that it's not possible to analyze a plot or literary style even or genre just based on these fragments. From the other side, we could describe a type of poetics and a type of writing. As for me, Antonych represent what is called scenario of writing. And the main topic of this text, the main problem as analyzed and articulated in this text is also a problem of writing. How difficult it is to write a novel. So I almost finished it. Yes. As for me, this manuscript could be treated as a cultural document demonstrating, at least in Ukrainian modernistic literature, scenario of writing in transition from the novel of action to the novel of state. Thank you for your attention.